You see, the reason so many people wrestle with obedience is because they only look at the price tag in front of them, and they never stop to compare it with the cost of what happens when they don't obey. That's where most of us get tricked. Obedience looks expensive. It looks like letting go of something you love. It looks like walking away from what feels safe. It looks like silence when you want to fight back. It looks like humility when your pride is screaming for recognition. It looks like forgiving when the wound is still fresh. It looks like saying yes to something you can't explain to anybody else. And because the price feels high, because it feels like you're giving up too much, we hesitate. We pause. We delay. But what we don't realize is that the cost of disobedience is always higher. Always. Disobedience doesn't announce itself immediately. It doesn't come with alarms blaring and signs flashing. It creeps in slowly. It disguises itself as freedom. It makes you think you got away with it. But over time, it begins to eat at your peace. It robs you of clarity. It pulls you further away from destiny, step by step, decision by decision, until one day you look around and realize you are so far off the path, you can't even see it anymore. That's the cost of disobedience. It takes more from you than obedience ever could. Think about it. Obedience may cost you a friendship, but disobedience could cost you your future. Obedience may cost you a season of discomfort, but disobedience could cost you your destiny. Obedience may feel like it's pulling something out of your hand, but disobedience will eventually strip everything from your heart. The price of obedience is temporary, but the cost of disobedience is permanent. And yet, people still wrestle with it because disobedience always comes dressed up. It's never obvious. It'll come to you like an easy choice, like the shortcut, like the path of least resistance. It'll whisper, you don't have to do it now. There's time. You can fix it later. Just this once won't matter. And the tragedy is, some of the greatest losses in life don't happen because someone hated their calling, but because they delayed their obedience. They thought they could wait. They thought they had more time. They thought the command could sit on the shelf while they did their own thing. But destiny doesn't wait. Purpose doesn't wait. Time doesn't wait. You know why obedience feels so hard? Because it doesn't just touch your actions. It tests your trust. Obedience is a trust issue. Do you trust enough to let go when you don't see what's next? Do you trust enough to say yes when the reward isn't clear? Do you trust enough to stand firm when people around you don't understand? That's why it feels expensive, because trust will always pull you out of your comfort zone. But here's what you've got to remember. Obedience is never a loss. It's always an investment. You may feel like you're giving something up, but in reality, you're planting a seed. You're trading temporary discomfort for eternal fulfillment. You're choosing destiny over distraction. And let me tell you, no one who has ever walked in full obedience has ever regretted it. People regret disobedience. People regret ignoring the voice. People regret doing it their own way. But when you obey, when you follow fully, When you trust the command, the reward always outweighs the sacrifice. Don't let the temporary sting of obedience blind you to the eternal reward of obedience, because the enemy will always magnify what you're losing and minimize what you're gaining. He'll make you focus on the pain of the moment so you don't see the promise that's waiting. That's why so many people never step into the fullness of who they were called to be. They got stuck at the price tag, and they never calculated the real cost of disobedience. So ask yourself tonight, are you looking at the price, or are you looking at the cost? Because one will scare you into hesitation, and the other will wake you up into action. One will have you clinging to what you think you need, while the other will remind you that obedience is the only way to receive what you truly can't live without. And I'll tell you this, there is nothing more expensive than missing your moment. Nothing. To have the opportunity placed in front of you, to have the door open, to have the command spoken, and to ignore it. That's a bill you don't want to pay, because destiny delayed is opportunity denied. Purpose postponed is potential wasted. And every day you sit in disobedience, the cost compounds. So yes, obedience has a price. But if you weigh it carefully, if you look with clear eyes, you'll see that the cost of disobedience will always demand more than you were ever willing to give. That's why you've got to make the choice now to trust the command, to follow the voice, to do it even when it stretches you, even when it costs you, even when it breaks you. Because you gain in obedience is greater than anything you think you're giving up. Now let me ask you, are you paying the price of obedience, or are you paying the cost of disobedience? Because whether you realize it or not, you're paying something. And the decision you make today will determine whether that cost becomes your greatest loss or your greatest reward. You ever notice how sometimes the thing that pulls you back the most isn't the enemy in front of you, but the people standing around you? It's not always some great obstacle or impossible barrier. It's the voices you allow into your space. Because when you're trying to follow what's been commanded of you, there will always be someone with an opinion. There will always be someone ready to question it, to doubt it, to water it down. And if you're not careful, you'll start adjusting your obedience to fit their comfort instead of aligning it with the truth you were given. That's where so many people lose their way, not because they didn't hear the command, but because they allowed too many other voices to compete with it. Obedience doesn't just demand action, it demands focus. You can't follow wholeheartedly if your attention is scattered. And that's the danger. When you surround yourself with people who don't see what you see, who don't believe what you believe, who don't understand what you're carrying, their doubt can start to feel louder than your faith. Suddenly, you're second-guessing what you already knew. You're hesitating on what you were once certain of. You're allowing fear to creep in, not because you lost conviction, but because you gave doubt a microphone. And the truth is, not everyone can handle your obedience. Not everyone is meant to walk with you in it. because obedience will always make people uncomfortable, especially people who are living in compromise. When you decide to fully follow the command, it confronts their hesitation. When you choose to say yes without conditions, it exposes their delays. That's why some people will try to talk you out of it. They'll tell you it doesn't take all that. They'll tell you you're being too extreme, too serious, too committed. But really, what they're saying is, don't make me uncomfortable by reminding me of what I've been ignoring. You've got to learn how to protect your obedience. You've got to be able to say, I can't let your opinion outweigh my conviction, because at the end of the day, the command wasn't given to them. It was given to you. The vision wasn't spoken to them. It was spoken to you. And if you let them pull you off course, if you let them dilute what you know is right, then you'll be the one carrying the weight of disobedience, not them. That's why silence becomes such a powerful weapon. You don't have to explain your obedience to everyone. You don't have to debate, defend, or convince, because some people aren't looking to understand. They're looking to distract. And the more energy you spend trying to justify why you're following the command, the less strength you have to actually follow it. Sometimes the greatest proof of obedience is not what you say, but what you keep doing regardless of who questions you. You've got to get comfortable being misunderstood. You've got to be okay with people calling you strange, with people thinking you've lost your mind, with people saying you've changed, because you have changed. When you decide to obey fully, you don't fit into the same mold anymore. You're not supposed to. You're walking on a path they can't see, so of course they won't understand it. But their lack of understanding doesn't excuse your disobedience. And let me tell you something. Obedience requires courage. Courage to say no when everyone else is saying yes. Courage to walk away when everyone else is staying. Courage to keep moving when everyone else is stuck. Courage to stand firm when everyone else is bending. And the reason courage is so essential is because obedience is never popular. Popularity follows convenience, but obedience follows conviction. You can't serve both. You can't chase applause and follow commands at the same time, because eventually you'll have to choose. Do I want to be liked, or do I want to be right? Do I want approval, or do I want purpose? Do I want comfort, or do I want calling? And the answer to that question will determine whether you walk in fullness or you walk in regret. Think about it. So many people are living small, not because they weren't given a big purpose, but because they shrunk it down to fit other people's expectations. They wanted to be accepted, so they compromised. They wanted to be liked, so they delayed. They wanted to be understood, so they watered it down. And in the process, they traded destiny for approval. But you've got to make a different choice. You've got to stand up and say, I would rather be misunderstood in obedience than celebrated in disobedience. Because the applause of people won't sustain you when you're empty. Their approval won't carry you through when you're broken. Their understanding won't fulfill you when you're lost. Only obedience will. So guard it, protect it, honor it. And when the voices rise up around you, when the questions and doubts start pressing in, remind yourself, this command wasn't given for them to approve. It was given for you to obey. And when you honor that, when you refuse to bend, when you stand firm, even in the face of misunderstanding, you'll find yourself stepping into a reward far greater than their approval could ever give. Now let me ask you, are you living for their applause, or are you walking in your obedience? Because only one of those choices will lead you to the life you were truly created for. Sometimes the hardest part of obedience is not the going, it's the waiting. Because when you hear a command, you expect movement, you expect action, you expect something to happen right away. But there are seasons when the instruction is clear, yet the progress seems invisible. Seasons when you've said yes, you've surrendered, you've positioned yourself, but nothing around you seems to shift. That's when obedience starts to feel like a burden. Because it's one thing to obey when the reward is immediate, but it's a different thing to obey when all you have is silence and uncertainty. Waiting tests the depth of your faith like nothing else. It exposes whether you trust the outcome or the one who promised it. It reveals whether your obedience is conditional or complete. Anybody can obey for a day, a week, or even a month. But what about when it's been years? What about when the promise still hasn't unfolded? And you've been left wondering if your yes was even heard. That's where most people give up. That's where doubt creeps in and whispers. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you wasted your time. Maybe you should have just done it your way. But obedience isn't about results on your timeline. It's about aligning your will to something higher than your own. Waiting is not wasted. Waiting is working, even when you can't see it. Just because it looks like nothing is happening doesn't mean nothing is happening. Think about a seed planted in the ground. You can water it, nurture it, give it light. But for a long time, there's no visible sign of growth. If you judge by what you see, you'd think nothing is happening. But underground, where eyes can't reach, roots are forming, life is stirring, and foundations are being built strong enough to sustain the harvest to come. That's what obedience in waiting looks like. You may not see the fruit yet, but the roots are being established. The problem is we don't like roots. We like results. We want evidence, something to show for our effort. But roots take time. Roots grow in silence. Roots go unnoticed. And yet without roots, whatever grows won't last. That's why some people who rush ahead find themselves collapsing when the storms hit. They had speed, but they had no stability. They had leaves, but they had no roots. Obedience in waiting isn't about punishing you. It's about preparing you so that when the harvest comes, you can sustain it. The waiting also refines you. It strips away pride, impatience, and self-dependence. It forces you to lean, not on your own understanding, but on faith that what was spoken will come to pass. Even if every visible sign says otherwise, it's in the waiting that your character is tested. Because what good is a promise if you don't have the maturity to handle it? What good is a blessing if you don't have the discipline to maintain it? Waiting is the training ground for the things you've been called to carry. And let's be real, waiting hurts. It hurts when you see others moving forward while you feel stuck. It hurts when doors open for people who seem less committed, less faithful, less deserving. It hurts when you wonder why your obedience seems to be costing you more than it's rewarding you. But don't confuse delay with denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. Timing is everything, and sometimes the blessing is delayed not because you're unworthy of it, but because you're not ready for it, or the environment isn't ready to receive you. Think about it. If you rush to open a door before it's fully unlocked, you'll only damage yourself and the door. But when the right time comes, the door swings open with ease. That's what divine timing looks like. The same command that seemed heavy in the waiting becomes light in the fulfillment. Because now you see why you had to hold on, why you had to trust, why you had to wait. The real question is, can you keep saying yes in silence? Can you keep showing up with no applause, no evidence, no guarantee except the word you received? Can you stay faithful when it feels like nothing is moving? Because if you can, that's when obedience becomes unshakable. That's when your yes is no longer tied to circumstances, but anchored in trust. So if you're in that waiting season, don't despise it. Don't rush it. Don't abandon it. The very silence you're frustrated with may be the soil of your strength. The very delay you resent may be the shield protecting you from a premature breakthrough that you weren't built to carry. Stay the course, stay rooted, stay obedient. Because when the time comes, and it will come, what's been forming in the dark will break through in the light. And you'll see it was worth every moment of waiting. So let me ask you, are you willing to trust the process long enough to see the promise? There are moments in life when obedience won't just cost you your comfort. It will cost you your relationships. Because when you truly commit to doing what you're called to do, when you decide that no matter what, you will follow through with the command you've been given. Not everyone is going to understand. Some people will question you, some will criticize you, and some will even walk away from you. And as painful as that sounds, that separation is often necessary. Because obedience has a way of revealing who's really aligned with your purpose and who was only attached to your convenience. When you decide to follow a path that doesn't look logical, people will start talking. They'll say, "Why would you do that? Why would you give that up? Why would you walk away from something secure for something uncertain?" What they don't realize is that obedience isn't about comfort. It's about calling. And calling rarely comes wrapped in clarity. It often looks like confusion to the outside world, but deep down you feel it. You can't shake it. You were told to move. You were told to act. You were told to obey. And here's the hard truth. Not everyone who started with you will stay with you. Some relationships were only meant for a season. They were only designed to get you this far, but they weren't built to go where you're going. And that's not betrayal, that's alignment. Because some people can't handle the weight of your obedience. They can't understand the sacrifice it demands. They love the version of you that fit their expectations, but they can't handle the version of you that's obedient to something higher. When obedience starts reshaping your priorities, you'll notice people getting uncomfortable. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you've become distant. They'll say you're different. You know what? They're right. Because obedience changes you. It strips away the need to please people and strengthens the desire to please only the one who gave you the command. And when that shift happens, those who were only attached to your old self won't recognize the new you. They'll fall away. And as much as it hurts, that's part of the process. Think about it. If every person you've ever known walked into your destiny with you, would there be room for the new relationships, the new opportunities, the new alignments that obedience attracts? Sometimes doors close not because you did something wrong, but because you did something right. Sometimes people exit not because you failed them, but because you outgrew them. Obedience has a way of pruning your life. It cuts off what can't carry the next season so that you can step fully into it. And yes, it hurts. Losing people you thought would always be there cuts deep. It feels like rejection. It feels like betrayal. But often it's redirection. It's making space for something greater, something purer, something rooted in destiny instead of comfort. And if you cling to what's leaving, you'll miss what's coming. If you keep trying to drag people who don't belong in your next chapter, all you'll do is slow yourself down and frustrate your journey. That's why obedience requires courage. Courage not just to face the unknown, but courage to let go of the familiar. Courage to stand alone if you have to. Courage to walk away from the voices that used to define you so you can hear clearly the voice that directs you. Sometimes obedience is lonely, but loneliness doesn't mean you're lost. It often means you're being led. So if people start falling away as you obey, don't chase them. Don't beg them to stay. Don't compromise your calling to keep their comfort. Because if they were truly meant to walk with you, obedience wouldn't push them away. It would pull them closer. The fact that they left doesn't mean you failed. It means your obedience exposed their limit. And that's okay, because obedience isn't about holding on to everything. It's about holding on to the right things. It's about trusting that every subtraction is part of a greater addition. Every loss is making room for a greater gain. And every closed door is setting the stage for one that was made just for you. So don't be afraid when obedience starts shifting your circle. Don't be afraid when people misunderstand you. Don't be afraid when it feels like you're walking alone. Stay faithful, stay steady, stay obedient. Because in the end, you'll see that every sacrifice, every loss, every tear was not in vain. The reward of obedience always outweighs the pain of separation. And I'll ask you this, if it costs you everybody but secures your destiny, Are you willing to pay that price? There's a truth about obedience that many people don't like to admit. It won't always look glamorous. It won't always feel rewarding. And it won't always bring instant results. Sometimes obedience is quiet. It's done in the dark. It's carried out with no applause, no recognition, no one saying, "Well done." And yet, it's in those unseen, uncelebrated moments of obedience that the foundation of your destiny is built. Because real obedience isn't about being noticed. It's about being faithful. It's about choosing to do what you were told to do, even when nobody's watching, even when you don't get credit for it, even when it feels like nothing is changing. You show up, you do it, and you trust that your unseen obedience is preparing you for a very visible breakthrough. Think about the seasons where it felt like your effort was wasted. You prayed, but the answer didn't come. You worked hard, but the results didn't show. You sacrificed, but no one appreciated it. That's when obedience is tested the most. That's when the temptation creeps in to quit, to compromise, to say, maybe it doesn't matter anymore. But the truth is, it matters most right there. Because obedience isn't just about outcomes. It's about trust. It's about saying, even if I don't see the fruit today, I'll keep planting the seed. And that's where many people stumble. They expect obedience to be a shortcut to blessing. They think, if I do what's right, something good should happen immediately. But obedience is rarely about the immediate. It's about the eventual. It's about planting something now that might not show until later. It's about being faithful in the small so you can be trusted with the greater. If you really think about it, some of the greatest moments of growth in your life didn't happen when you were celebrated. They happened when you were hidden. They happened when nobody clapped for you, nobody encouraged you, and yet you kept moving, kept working, kept being obedient. That's where strength is built. That's where discipline is forged. That's where your character develops. Because obedience in silence prepares you for responsibility in the spotlight. And let me tell you something. Obedience that only works when people are watching isn't obedience, it's performance. But when you can be obedient in secret, when you can say yes without needing validation, that's when you're really anchored in purpose. That's when you're not living for applause, but for alignment. Not for recognition, but for responsibility. Not for comfort, but for calling. Sometimes the delay you're experiencing isn't denial. It's development. The unseen years are sharpening you, stretching you, molding you. And even though you feel overlooked, you're not forgotten. Even though you feel hidden, you're not invisible. Every step of obedience, every act of faith, every sacrifice of consistency is preparing you for the door that will open the opportunity that will come, the breakthrough that will arrive. But here's the test. Will you keep being obedient when the results don't show? Will you still give your best when nobody sees it? Will you keep walking the path when it feels like the reward is nowhere in sight? Because true obedience is measured not in your ability to start with passion, but in your ability to continue with perseverance. There's a story written in all of us. Some chapters will be celebrated, some will be overlooked, and some will even be misunderstood. But when obedience guides your steps, every chapter matters. Nothing is wasted. Not one tear, not one trial, not one act of faithfulness. And when the moment comes for your story to be revealed, when the season shifts and the hidden becomes visible, you'll look back and realize that the silent seasons of obedience were the very moments that prepared you for the blessing that followed. So if you feel like you're in a place where obedience seems unnoticed, unappreciated, or unrewarded, hold on. Don't stop. Don't get weary. Don't abandon the process because you don't see progress. Because what looks quiet today is building strength for tomorrow. What looks hidden now will soon be revealed. What looks like it's not working is setting you up for the moment when everything will fall into place. Stay obedient, stay steady, stay faithful. Because obedience in the dark is what qualifies you for blessing in the light. And let me ask you, are you willing to keep walking when nobody sees, so that one day the whole world will see what your obedience has built? There comes a point in life where obedience will not only demand your action, it will demand your surrender. It will require you to lay down your own plan, your own timetable, your own sense of control, and trust that there is a greater design unfolding beyond what you can see. And that's where it gets uncomfortable, because surrender doesn't come naturally to us. We're wired to want to control outcomes, to calculate risks, to make sure everything adds up before we take a step. But obedience doesn't always give you the luxury of calculation. Sometimes it just says, move. Sometimes it whispers, let go. And that's when faith has to rise above fear. Wait, how many times have you held life? Have you held on to something simply because you didn't know what would happen if you let it go? Maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was a job, maybe it was a habit that was familiar even though it wasn't good for you. We cling to what we know because it feels safe, but obedience will often call you out of what's comfortable and into what's necessary. And when it does, surrender becomes the only doorway to growth. Surrender doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't mean you're giving up on yourself or that you're settling for less. Surrender means you trust enough to stop fighting against the direction you've been given. It means you stop resisting the flow of where you're being led. It means you're willing to put down your own plan so your hands are free to receive something better. Too often we miss out on what's greater because we're so busy clutching on to what's familiar. But if you never let go, you'll never be free enough to reach for more. And here's the truth. Obedience will always test your willingness to surrender control. It will ask you to step into places that don't make sense. It will ask you to forgive when you don't want to. It will ask you to keep going when you'd rather quit. It will ask you to release something that you thought defined you, only to discover that it was actually limiting you. Surrender is not about losing. It's about making room. It's about creating the space for transformation, for blessing, for purpose to manifest in your life. But here's where many people struggle. Surrender doesn't happen once. It's not a single moment where you give everything up and suddenly it all gets easier. Surrender is daily. It's a choice you make again and again, because every day you wake up with a new temptation to control, a new reason to hold on, a new fear that whispers, don't let go. And every day you have to decide, will I cling to what I know, or will I trust the path I can't yet see? When you live in surrender, obedience becomes lighter, because instead of dragging your own will into every decision, you align yourself with a will that's bigger than your own. That alignment doesn't take away the struggle, but it gives you peace in the middle of it. It gives you strength when the road feels long. It gives you clarity when everything around you feels confusing. That's the beauty of surrender. It doesn't make the journey easier, but it makes you stronger for the journey. And think about this. So much of the pain we carry comes from resisting what we should have released a long time ago. We break our own hearts holding on to things that were never meant to go with us. We wear ourselves out fighting battles that weren't ours to fight. And all the while, obedience is asking us to surrender, to let go, to trust. The moment you release what's not serving you is the moment your hands are free to embrace what's waiting for you. But surrender isn't just about what you give up. It's also about what you gain. When you surrender control, you gain peace. When you surrender your fear, you gain courage. When you surrender your own plan, you gain a purpose that's deeper, stronger, and far more powerful than anything you could have designed for yourself. Surrender doesn't diminish you. It enlarges you. It expands your capacity. It deepens your faith. It anchors your soul. So the real question is this: what are you still holding on to that obedience has been asking you to release? What's that thing you keep clinging to? Even though deep down you know it's keeping you from moving forward. Because at the end of the day, obedience isn't just about what you do. It's about what you let go of. And surrender is the test that proves whether you really trust enough to follow through. So don't be afraid to release what's familiar for the sake of what's greater. Don't be afraid to loosen your grip on what you thought was secure in order to step into what's destined. Because obedience will always require surrender, and surrender will always open the door to transformation. And I'll ask you, this, are you ready to let go of what you've been holding on to so you can finally walk into what's been waiting for you? There will come a moment when obedience will not only shape your present, but secure your future. And this is where many people struggle, because we tend to look at obedience as something that only affects us right now. What it costs, what it demands, what it interrupts in our daily lives. But obedience doesn't just live in the moment. It plants seeds that will grow long after today has passed. Every act of obedience, whether small or great, has ripple effects that stretch beyond what you can see. You may think you're just making a single choice, But in reality, you're shaping an entire destiny. Think about the choices you've made in the past. The times you followed through when it would have been easier to quit. The moments you said yes when every part of you wanted to say no. The seasons where you stayed faithful even though the reward wasn't immediate. Those moments didn't just get you through the day. They built character. They deepened resilience. They carved out a path that led you here. And that's the thing about obedience. It doesn't always show its results instantly, but it's always setting the stage for your future. We live in a world that glorifies instant results, instant gratification, instant recognition. But obedience doesn't work on the timeline of the world. It works on the timeline of purpose. And purpose often takes time to unfold. Sometimes obedience will look like sacrifice. Sometimes it will look like patience. Sometimes it will look like waiting when everybody else is moving ahead. And in those seasons, it's easy to feel like your obedience doesn't matter. But every seed planted in obedience will produce a harvest in due time. You may not see it today. You may not see it tomorrow, but destiny is being shaped in the unseen. The power of obedience is that it multiplies. You may think your decision only affects you, but obedience is contagious. When you choose to live with integrity, when you choose to follow through, when you choose to walk in alignment with what you've been called to do, you're not just changing your own life. You're influencing every life connected to you. Your family, your children, your friends, your community, they all feel the impact of the seeds you plant. And the fruit of your obedience may become the foundation someone else stands on tomorrow. But here's the truth that makes people hesitate. Obedience often costs something in the present. It costs comfort. It costs convenience. It costs pride. Sometimes it costs relationships that weren't meant to go with you into the next season. But while obedience always costs you something now, it always pays you something greater later. The return doesn't come in the form of temporary pleasure. It comes in the form of lasting fulfillment. It comes in the form of doors you couldn't have opened by yourself. It comes in the form of peace that money can't buy, influence can't guarantee, and power can't manufacture. So when obedience feels heavy, remind yourself that you're not just obeying for today. You're obeying for tomorrow. You're obeying for the unseen future that's being shaped with every step you take. You're obeying for the people who will be blessed by your faithfulness. You're obeying for the version of yourself you haven't even met yet, the one who will look back and thank you for not giving up, for not taking shortcuts, for not trading destiny for temporary satisfaction. And I'll tell you this, obedience is often tested the hardest right before the breakthrough, because the closer you get to stepping into what's been prepared for you, the louder the distractions will become, the heavier the temptations will feel, the more appealing the shortcuts will look. That's not coincidence. That's resistance trying to stop you from stepping into what's already yours. Don't fall for it. Don't let what's temporary make you forfeit what's eternal. Your destiny isn't shaped in the grand moments where the world is watching. It's shaped in the quiet decisions you make when no one sees you. It's shaped in the late nights where you keep going even though you're tired. It's shaped in the private prayers, in the unseen sacrifices, in the steady, daily obedience that builds momentum over time. That's where character is forged. That's where trust is built. That's where destiny takes root. So don't despise the small acts of obedience, because they're not small at all. They are investments into a future you can't fully imagine yet. They are the reason doors will open years from now. They are the reason opportunities will find you instead of you chasing them. They are the reason peace will cover you when storms come. Every choice, every step, every sacrifice made in obedience is building a legacy. And so I'll leave you with this. Your future is calling, and it's waiting on your obedience. Every step you take in alignment is writing the story of who you're becoming. Every decision you make today is echoing into tomorrow. Don't trade your destiny for comfort. Don't sell your purpose for convenience. Choose obedience even when it costs you, because the return is greater than you can see right now. And I ask you tonight, are you willing to obey today so that your tomorrow will thank you? There comes a point in your journey when you realize obedience isn't just about what you do, it's about what you're willing to let go of. And that's where most people struggle. Not with the going, but with the leaving. Because every command, every call requires you to step away from something that once felt safe, comfortable, and familiar. But what you don't always realize is that the very thing you're holding on to might be the very thing holding you back. See, we all love the idea of destiny. We love the thought of walking in purpose. But purpose has a price, and the price is separation. Separation from relationships that drain you instead of feed you. Separation from habits that pacify you instead of grow you. Separation from environments that keep you small when you were created to expand. And if you're not willing to release what's hindering you, then you'll never have the hands free to grasp what's ahead of you. It's like trying to run a race with weights tied to your ankles. You can move, you can push forward, but you're dragging something that doesn't belong on your journey. And the longer you carry it, the more exhausted you become. That's why some people burn out before they even reach halfway. Not because they weren't built for the race, but because they refused to drop the weight. Sometimes obedience looks like closing the door and refusing to open it again. Even when it's lonely, even when it hurts, even when it feels like you've lost more than you've gained. Because what you lost may have been familiar, but it wasn't fruitful. And the hardest lesson is learning to stop watering dead soil. You can pour all your time, all your energy, all your love into something that cannot grow. But at the end of the day, it's still lifeless. And God didn't command you to stay stuck in lifeless places. He commanded you to step into living ones. And yes, it will cost you. It will cost you the comfort of people who don't understand. It will cost you the approval of people who wanted you to stay the same. It will cost you the security of what you've always known. But if you never release, you'll never receive. You can't cling to yesterday and fully embrace tomorrow at the same time. One of them has to go. Now, don't misunderstand me. Letting go doesn't mean you stop loving. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you wish bad on anyone. It simply means you recognize that some chapters in your life are complete. And the worst thing you can do to your story is try to keep writing the same chapter when the author has already turned the page. That's where obedience becomes trust. Trusting that if he told you to walk away, there's a reason. Trusting that if he asked you to release is way. It's because what's in front of you is greater than what's behind you. Trusting that if the command feels heavy, the reward will be worth it. And that's the part people miss. Obedience doesn't just take faith in the command, it takes faith in the one who gave it. Think about it. If a child is holding on to a broken toy and the parent asks them to let it go, the child doesn't understand why. They're clinging to it because it's all they know, even though it's damaged. But the parent isn't asking them to release it because they want them to have less. They're asking them to release it because they want to replace it with something better. That's what obedience feels like. You're standing there with a broken piece of yesterday, afraid to let it go, not realizing that what's waiting for you is more complete, more whole, more fitting for where you're going. So ask yourself, what have you been holding on to that's stopping you from moving forward? What relationships, what mindsets, what habits have become chains around your purpose? Because obedience is not just about saying yes. It's about saying no to the things that no longer align. And until you do that, your yes will always be divided. The truth is, you can't step into new life with old baggage. You can't hold on to doubt and fully embrace faith. You can't stay tied to fear and walk in courage. You can't be anchored to the past and expect to soar into the future. Something has to be cut loose. And that's the part most people avoid, because cutting hurts. But healing never comes without a cut. Growth never comes without pruning. Progress never comes without separation. So today, make a decision. Decide that your obedience is worth more than your comfort. Decide that your future is worth more than your past. Decide that your calling is worth more than your approval rating. And once you decide, don't look back. Don't second guess. Don't return to what you left behind. Move forward with your hands open, your heart ready, and your eyes fixed ahead. Because one thing is certain. Whatever you release in obedience will never compare to what you gain in reward. So tell me, what are you still holding on to that it's time to let go of?